seen it happen. A pair of dark eyes had seen it, though. The man falling through cool sunlight, the thin and yellow sunlight that sweeps this land in middle spring. But nothing would be said. Nothing. Not ever. It was the way of things. That was known long before the horse soldiers rode through here on their way to the Little Bighorn. That was known a long time ago. Carlisle McMillan leaned on a fence post, looked west, stared at the distance. Great run of empty space, broken only by an occasional butte. The one a half-mile to his right, 3,237 feet high, was called Wolf Butte. A woman was dancing there on the crest, but Carlisle couldn't see her. Bare feet on short grass, she moved. Far off, far down, she could just make out a figure standing beside a pickup truck. 20 feet behind her, the Indian played a flute, his back resting against the gnarled trunk of a long-dead scrub pine. A low-slung cloud moved on to the butte, the cold wetness of it touching the graceful arch of the woman's back, touching the curve of her legs. It touched her face, and the opal ring on her left middle finger, and the silver bracelet around her right wrist, touched the silver falcon hanging from the chain around her neck. Far off and far down, Carlisle McMillan shifted his truck into reverse and backed onto the road. When the cloud drifted away from the butte, and the woman again could see what lay on the plain below her, the figure was gone, only the vague image of a pickup truck moving south. The flute angled down to silence. She raised her arms through the mist to the sky, lowered them, and walked toward the Indian. He was old, but his body was hard like fence wire, and she settled onto him. The wind was light and cool and wet. Close to her, he could smell the sandalwood with which she had bathed that morning. The rain lifted for a moment, and over the Indian's shoulder she watched the hawk flying toward a cliff, the same one from which her father had glimpsed the earth rising toward him. Looking back on it, if Carlisle McMillan had known what lay ahead of him, he might not have stopped in Salamander that first night, might have kept right on going through and out the other side of Yerkes County. Too damn much grief, as it turned out, for a man doing nothing except trying to find some peace and quiet. That's what he once said. Easy to understand why he might say that. His recollections were still clear and hard-formed. Sirens, men shouting, dust climbing high and fast into morning skies, fires on the crest of Wolf Butte, and the slow downward slide of anything resembling justice and plain dealing. Carlisle's jaw tightened when he talked about that part of it. Then he would shift over to a half-smile. But there were compensations. On balance, I'd do it over again. Of course he would. How many women could you find like Susanna Benteen? Or Gallie Devereaux, for that matter? Pretty close to none. Susanna and Gallie, and what came to be known as the Yerkes County War, feathered out the boy, made him stand upright and lurch forward into manhood. Carlisle admitted it. He came into Yerkes County from the north late on that August day, stopped and looked at the country around him. The roll of short grass, Wolf Butte to his right, mist, easy wind, silence. Heading south again on the red dirt road, he hit pavement after a few miles. Route 41. He looked at his map. Full dark coming in an hour or so. A little town east about 6 miles. In the other direction, the next place of any size was Casper, Wyoming, 300 miles southwest. 15 driving minutes later, Carlisle squinted past the slap of his windshield wipers and saw the 4 cylindrical towers of a grain elevator ahead. Sign on the edge of town. Welcome to Salamander. Population, 942. Elevation, 2,263. The sign was battered, needed a new paint job. 3 bullet holes were grouped within the O in welcome. Problematical greeting. He moved slowly along the highway, doubling as Main Street, the town spreading out a block or two on either side of the commercial district and 5 blocks beyond it at the ends. Merchants along Main Street were shutting their front doors at the end of the day. The buildings they locked were mostly white frame, some of them well-built originally, but in need of scraping and paint now. Carlisle McMillan put his tires against a curb with chunks missing from the concrete in front of a tavern called Leroy's. Got out, flexed his knees, swung his arms. Long day. Thirsty day. 397 miles since dawn. He walked into Leroy's just at sundown and slid onto the first stool, feeling grimy. Leroy was at the other end of the wooden bar, talking to a tall cowboy wearing a Stetson. 2 men in caps with fertilizer logos on the crowns were bending over the shabbiest excuse for a pool table Carlisle had ever seen. Leroy came along behind the bar, cigarette dangling from his mouth. He nodded. Not friendly, not unfriendly. Flat, in the way of no concern for anything or anyone. "I'll have a Miller's," Carlisle said. Leroy slid open the metal cooler below the bar, inspected the contents, and twisted his head upward. "Out of Miller's. Got Bud and Grain Belt." "Bud's okay." Leroy opened the bottle and set it on the bar along with the little beer glass. "That'll be 75. Carlisle laid out $1. Leroy rang the cash register, slid a quarter along the bar toward him, and walked back to his conversation with the cowboy. "Seen the witch lately?" he asked the cowboy. "Screw the witch." Leroy laughed. "Well, a lot of us would like to give it a shot sometime." "Yeah, fat chance," the cowboy said, looking down at his whiskey and water. "Ever notice that Injun she hangs around with?" "No. What Injun?" "Old Injun. Lives somewhere out in the Buttes." The cowboy tilted his head toward Carlisle and mumbled something only half under his breath about hair longer than a woman's, not caring whether Carlisle heard him or not. Carlisle drank his Bud, wondering just where in the big peculiar he had landed. "How's Gally doing, Jack?" Leroy asked. "I haven't seen her for a while, except to catch sight of her gone through town in the Bronco." "She's okay. You know women. Always goddamn complaining about this or that, never happy with the way things are. Thinks we ought to sell the place and try something else. Christ, by the time we'd pay off the first and second mortgages, there'd be nothing left." Carlisle thought about a second beer, but the company didn't warrant it, and he didn't feel like troubling Leroy again. Leroy stood with one foot on a keg, laughing with the cowboy, not bothering to turn when Carlisle finished his beer and walked out. As he put his Red Wing lace-ups on the sidewalk outside Leroy's, Carlisle's first observation was that an elderly man was watching him from a second-floor window across the street, above what used to be Lester's TV and appliance. His second was that Salamander and the Sun pretty much closed up shop at the same time. In the past few months, Carlisle had seen hundreds of small towns, and Salamander was not unique. Other places, lots of them, looked the same with their empty storefronts, boarded-up schools, few young people on the streets, a general sense of malaise, of lifelessness, of things gone wrong. It was a pretty sunset, though, his first evening in Salamander, the kind you get out in the big spaces, with the western sky turning pink magenta, laid up against a dome of azure to the north. Then twilight came, with a descending chill typical of late summer nights in those parts. Carlisle